Hello, this is National Chess Master RRats continuing my video series on the correspondence team match played between my video lessons group and the team CARPE DIEM. This was played on board 131, our man Amar 81 versus EdsondeMatos, and rating advantage about high 1700 versus high 1500 thereabouts. Anyway, they had two games. Let's have a look. Okay. E4, E5. We're in a Scotch game, and now White employs the Scotch Gambit. And I'm happy to say it looks like both players did some research on this. You'll see why in a moment. Maybe White did a little more than Black, and again you'll see here in a moment. This is good when you follow main line because you can learn the main line if you're consulting books and databases. You can learn this opening and how to play them. And objectively, Black has, I'm not sure of all Black's moves. I believe the main line is knight f6 and you answer e5 with d5. I'm somewhat familiar with the basics of this. I know Roman Zinjashvili has a very nice video series on how White can play for a tiny advantage with this opening. It's worth looking at. Anyway, I don't think bishop c5 is the most common move. And clearly what happens here shows that White did his opening research a little better. White's here gambiting a pawn, but he has a trick to gain it back. And what I found when I was checking to see how far this went into book was that White scores extremely well with this opening, something like 75%. So the main move is bishop takes f7 check. But I'm even wondering, just looking at this position now, what about queen d5? Because that's the follow-up to pick up this bishop. Does queen d5 have any merit? No, it doesn't. Queen e7. Okay, that guards the bishop and covers the mate. Okay, so White sacks his bishop, but he gets it right back. Now Black can't castle. So now White's regained his piece and regained his gambited pawn too. And Black looks to be okay, but you have to remember one thing. Black can't castle. Let's see how the game continues. Black offers a queen trade, which White declines, and I think that was smart. You've got a little advantage. You want to play it. You want to keep the position going. And here, what move have I been condemning all over this match? These rook pawn moves. Maybe Black felt it necessary. I don't know. The bishop's not threatening to come to g5. The knight going to g5 is no good. Black's got to get some development. Castle by hand, whatever it takes. His king is in the center. If White finds a way to open up the center file here shortly, Black could be in a world of hurt. Anyway, I think castling might have been a little better up front, but this eyeballs d5 for the knight, but it does force Black to develop a piece instead of pushing his rook pawns again. And here's an interesting possibility. What about knight b5 now? This might drive the king over to d8 to cover c7. And very interesting strategy, the c7 square, which we'll see in the next game. But White does fine by castling. White's got a very slight advantage here. And a lot of it's based on the fact that Black can't castle. But here I think White went wrong by allowing a queen trade. Keep him on the board, okay? Just develop this bishop so at least the rooks are connected. If White wants to double the pawns, fine. Let him. Then you've got an open file here. Maybe you can get some pressure down the line. But this more or less makes the game pretty even because the fact that Black can't castle isn't as much of a factor now. A lot of the chief threats have vanished. And now here I think White made a mistake. I think if pawn takes, this is the correct way to go. Go ahead and win this pawn. You step into a pin, but, okay, let's see, which rook do you want to put here? Probably this one, because if White blunders with h4, you can take that. But, Black can play f4 here. And for what it's worth, Black's a pawn ahead, okay? Maybe Black can generate something with his rooks he can try it. You know, it's hard to kind of find a plan. But if white maintains the balance here and doesn't give black any counterplay against these pawns, or somehow find a way to pitch one of these pawns so that maybe the black pawn majority becomes potent, white's got excellent winning chances. Black is struggling to prove that he can hold this position. So I think white dropped the ball here, and this would have been a much, much better continuation. Anyway, he played knight d5. And now let's see. Can he still do it? Well, he's got to watch out for, if pawn takes, there's a knight check, and the knight will come back and take it. So white gets rid of the check. And now, instead of white having a nice pawn advantage on the king side, suddenly white's down a pawn. Okay, white could have been up a pawn. White's now down a pawn, but he's getting it back. But the black pieces are coming to life. Remember how that king was uncastled earlier and the rooks were a mess? Well, now the king has cleared the back rank. He's safe on d7, and black's got his rooks in play first. Anyway, the game is still pretty even. White's got to watch out for the threats that black is generating. Now, he retreats his king back to the corner. So maybe black's getting some headway here. And, black seems to have a small advantage, if anything, just because he's got a little more room maneuver. But unfortunately, though, with the pieces coming off the board, you're reaching a rook and pawn ending. And objectively, this should end in a draw. But white's going to go on to lose, and we have to ask ourselves, why does white lose? And if we have a similar position as this with white, how can we make sure we don't lose? Okay. Well, first let's see how the game progresses, and we'll go from there. Okay. Who has a passed pawn? Well, white does. Okay. So are you happy with the draw? Well, you'll want to win with white and draw with black, but if you're drawing with white against a high-rated player, that's got to be a plus. So, what weaknesses does white have? Okay, with the king and pawn as they are right here, black can't penetrate with his rook. White controls the g file, and the e file is off limits. So, right now, white's maintaining a certain amount of balance. There is one weak pawn right here for white, this pawn on d5. But at the same time, there's a weak pawn for black. There's one on h5. Okay, so the first thing I think white does wrong is he starts advancing his queenside pawns. And I've seen this so many times in games. When you advance your pawns, you're advancing them to become targets. Okay? See, for instance, in this position, I'm not saying it's a great move, but white could go, or black could immediately go and attack that pawn on b4, gaining a tempo, and then swing behind this pawn. I mean, just as a possibility. Now, I'm not saying white doesn't have resources, but why give your opponent a chance to do something like that? So many times I talk to people when they lose a game, and I can see myself when I've lost a game. Oh, I overlooked this move, 4 moves deep. Well, why did you overlook it? Well, did you spend enough time on the position? And if had you spent enough time on the position, there's a good chance you'd find it. And that's the whole objective of correspondence chess. You want to find the best move in the position because you're not faced with the ticking clock, which makes you move on average to 2 to 3 minutes a move. You could spend 3 days on this move because that's the time limit. Okay. So you've got time objectively. So b4 is trying to restrain. It looks like what white's trying to do is restrain the black pawns, but they're already restrained. Whoops, let's get this pawn on b6. They're already restrained. Black is going to have to work just to get c6 in, okay? Because chances are if he pushes c6, he's going to drop that pawn. So his only pawns to fight with are these 2 pawns, and they're not going to make any headway against these 2 pawns. So objectively what this tells us is there's no reason to move these pawns. let black find a way to go and attack them. So a good first move here, which attacks and defends at the same time, would be rook g5. Okay, this says to black, hey, I'm going to take your pawn if you don't watch it. Now, what does black do? Well, what can he do? If he pushes the pawn, maybe white sneaks in behind. Okay, we bring the rook over here, but I'm just going to chase you out. And you come over here and attack my pawns, and I'm willing to give up a couple of pawns if I can get mine going first. Okay. Now here it goes. Now this. White has 2 passed pawns, so does black. Whites are isolated, blacks aren't. Black is a pawn ahead, but these pawns are a ways off from becoming a queen. They have several moves to go. This one is threatening to run right now, and the way this rook is positioned, it's not ready to fight against this pawn. That leaves the king. So let's start running the king over there. And again, we're looking to draw the game as white. We're not necessarily looking to win. Right now we're a pawn down, but we can be a pawn down on a rook and pawn ending, and hold a draw pretty easily. Now what does black do? Okay, if black comes here to get his king closer, white just snaps up this pawn, and you can see this game will probably peter into a draw really quick, especially if black plays rook takes and white takes this one, and now we have equal pawns. Black will start pressuring the f pawn, or maybe just hold on to his b pawn, and the game will probably end in a draw pretty quickly. So that was if black pushes his pawn. The other choice is to deal with a passive rook. Put the rook here. Now the rook is stuck guarding this pawn. Well, that gives white a chance to start moving up the board. Okay, here comes his pawn. Again, we've shown that these pawns are not potent at all. Now it's time for black to get his king closer. But you see here, white hasn't given up a pawn to reach this position, and his pawn is becoming a little bit more dangerous. Okay, and from here, I think it's safe to say that white should hold a draw pretty easily. So let's see what happens. Let's back it up to where white plays b4. And as I noted, immediately white starts counterplay on the pawns. So black checks, and now he decides he's not going to send the king to the king side. He's going to stay over here on the queen side. And now there goes the pawn on d5. So this is the candidate for promotion. White needs to advance this one now, but instead he advances the h pawn. Now that's okay. Maybe what he's trying to do is put this rook here, and then if black takes, white takes back, and then this pawn runs. Maybe that's what he's trying to do. But black finds some resources here. He stops and gives a check, and then starts going after the weak white pawns. Now remember, just a couple moves ago, black had no chance to enter his rook to that square. Remember when the white king was on f2? Well, suddenly, because white's moved his king up at the cost of a pawn, black is threatening to clean up the weak white pawns. So white spends a move and advances one, and he's trying to get as many of them off the board as he can, but this just leads black to a position where he's got 3 passed pawns and white has but 1. White still needs to win the pawn on h5, and while he's trying to win that pawn, black's pawns are getting ready to advance, and here they come. Okay, and there goes another one. Now white collects this pawn, but black is a pawn up, and all 4 of his pawns are on the 4th rank. White has 1 pawn on the 4th rank, and both the white pawns are blocked by white pieces. So black is way ahead in the race to make a new queen. And it was black's move. So there goes the pawn again. And here he goes. And pretty soon white's going to try to shove his pawn. But here he has a trick. hoping at some point to be able to hurdle and pick up that pawn, but black just plays to get rid of that possibility. He could have advanced it one more square. It was safe, but it doesn't really matter. Now look at the black pawns. Just a moment ago they were back on the 4th rank, and white's managed to get his king and rook at least out of the way for the rook pawn is now clear, but the bishop pawn is only clear 1 square. Black's gained a lot of space here. And now that pawn goes on to the 7th rank where it's just deadly, and here comes another one to join it. And white's finally getting some play with his rook pawn, but it's just simply not enough, and black calculates a win from this position. He's going to be able to he wants to sacrifice this rook for this pawn on h7, and when that happens, he can play c2 and one of the pawn's queens. And we'll see what happens. He comes back, and now black could take on h2 or h7, but there's no hurry. He just pushes this pawn up, and white builds a bridge. They call this building a bridge when you stick your rook between the other rook and the passed pawn, but black has this all calculated out. White's able to make a queen, but it's immediately lost. So what black did wrong there was not keep his pawn safe and not play for the draw. I think he was trying too hard to try to get a win in a position he couldn't have. Anyway, let's go on to the other game. And I always wonder when I post a new game, what move will it start us out on? Ho! Way down at the end. Well, not the end, but after the critical phase. So anyway, we have the Philidor defense. And what does white do? Oh my goodness, h3. Why? Why are you doing this move? It's a terrible move. Develop something. You don't mind if black plays bishop g4 in these lines, okay? It's common. Anyway, what can I say? Uh-oh, there's one for black. Yeah, you guys want to do it. You're going to learn the hard way. I hope you guys will watch these videos and stop these things and learn how to take advantage of when somebody does it. Because I've spelled it out. If you watch enough videos, I've spelled it out. Okay, now here's one of the drawbacks of the h3. There may be a sacrifice on this square. Well, not right now, but there may be one. And what does black do? Oh, h6. Was white planning to put anything on g5? Well, maybe the knight. Well, if he does, just take this bishop off, okay? If you don't want to lose the bishop pair. Or let him take and open up the f-file so you can attack. Okay? h6 doesn't develop a piece. It's a terrible move. Oh, man, I'm just seeing it so much. I don't know what to do. I got some ideas. I'm going to make a video on the rook pawn moves. I've just got to make a good one. Okay, so we have some exchanges here. And, essentially the game's about even. But here, I think black commits a serious weakness, which ultimately leads to his demise. Normally, you don't want to see what black has done. He violated one of these rules that you don't do. He's making exchanges to develop white's pieces. He's developed the white queen. Another way to have done it would just been take with the pawn, and then, if you don't want your bishop traded for knight, go ahead. It's okay. Now, simply develop a piece, okay? Bishop e7. It's not hard. If white takes, and we don't know he's going to take, he takes, okay? You take back with the queen. Now your queen's improved. If he plays knight f5, well, just castle. But the fact that you've played this h6 move, there may be some sacks for white in here. These things, those rook pawn moves are deadly. Okay, so let's see. He took get the right position here. Have to find it in all the side analysis that this thing does. So black now compounds his error of developing the black queen by weakening his position to drive it out. c5 creates two weaknesses. When you move a pawn, well, four weaknesses actually. When you move a pawn, there's certain squares it can never cover again. It can never cover b6, can never cover d6. Now d6 is a backward pawn on the open file. It can also never cover b5, although the a6 pawn is doing that for you. It could also never cover d5, so white has a nice outpost square here too. So white is wishing zugs and takes here. Figures if pawn takes, well, let's see. Maybe this is not a good move. Let's see. What am I missing here? Takes, check. Let's take with the king, and knight d5, threatening a fork. The reason I took with the king was so, well, no, I wanted this knight to be able to take this pawn, but knight d5. Let's see. I think white's got a slight advantage here. See, this pawn is in the way of this bishop, but you know, black's a pawn ahead. White has to get it back. Is black a pawn ahead? No, he's not a pawn ahead. There's a missing c pawn. Black can probably hold on to that pawn on d4, but eventually white may very well win it. Now, this is probably not good for black. So let's see what happened. He took on e6. White saved his queen with a check. That would have been a good time to just, well, you can't play b5. Knight takes, there's a pin. Okay, might have been a good time to play queen d7. But he blocked with the knight. And now I was talking in the other video about how c7 is a weakness. There it is. It's threatened. A knight c7 family fork, or royal fork. There's a lot of terms for it. How can black defend that? Well, not too many ways. You can castle queenside, put your rook on c8 or your king on d8. Rook on c8 was the best move, and white holds a slight advantage based on the outpost on d5 and the bad black bishop and the backward pawn. King d8 just means you can't castle. But castling queenside was a fatal error because c7 remains weak. And white goes and threatens a nasty checkmate. And really, there's hardly any good way to defend this. Now, had the a6 pawn been on a7, that pawn would have been a goner. Black could have castled queenside. But because it's on a6, b6 is not a defense. Because a7 would fall, and there's the threat again. So black decided to jettison his queen, and we'll see how here in a second. See, there it goes. Now white's ahead of queen for a piece. And I'm going to kind of rush through it. It looked like maybe white got a little carried away at one point and pitched his queen back, but still came out with a winning game. White has the advantage of a queen for a knight here, but it's going to evaporate here in a little bit. And really, there's not much to comment on when it's a decisive win like this, unless you get sloppy. And white ended up getting a little sloppy, as we will see. And here, what white needs to play is, I think d6 will, no, he has to take here first. Okay, now knight d3. Yeah, here white needs to play d6. But I guess he just wasn't paying attention. And now he has to give his queen back. But he still has a piece ahead, and black's running out of material, and the rest is pretty easy. And black really has no hope here. The pawns are coming up the board, and there's nothing black can do about it. But here, white doesn't take the rook back. Just rook takes. He just lets him keep his rook. It's just kind of surprising. But again, if king d8, just rook check, and you're going to get a queen with check. So, it's okay to pitch the rook. And he just takes back here. And now white basically has an unstoppable checkmate. He's going to mate in 3 moves no matter what black does. So black resigned. Anyway, I want to thank you for looking at this video. Well played by Amar81. A little shaky slightly, especially with those rook pawn moves, but you found the right moves when they counted. And not too bad by EdsondeMatos. Just a couple of critical errors, and hopefully I helped your endgame play. And also everyone that watched. Thanks so much for your time. Take care.